Chairperson, delegates, you are all very welcome to Carlow, and it is a great pleasure for me to present this report at our 52nd Annual Delegate Conference. At the outset, can I apologise for opening my address here today on a negative note, but I believe it is a matter that needs to be addressed. Despite inviting the Minister for Health over 2 months ago to address our conference, yet again he was unable to find the time to join us and engage with us, the largest group of professionals delivering mental health services. We, of course, will have a very successful conference, but I'd ask you to reflect on what it says about the priority and focus on mental health by government when it is now 6 years since a minister, or indeed junior minister, addressed the P&A conference in person. However, our focus on the provision and delivery of mental health services to the citizens of this country remains steadfast, not like government. The past year has once again been very challenging. We should have expected that emerging from the 2 years of COVID would bring some relative calm and a return to normality, but the war in Ukraine has directly resulted in new and unforeseen cost of living pressures and high inflation rates, which ultimately forced a review of the public sector pay agreement building momentum. On the service side, we saw the continued increase of nursing shortages and their effects on service provision and the ever-worsening crisis in child and adolescents' mental health services. From the point of view of the Union, the past year seen our membership remain healthy despite the significant increase in vacancies. You heard details outlined in the National Treasurer's report, Ollie's report this morning, and in that context, I want to acknowledge the work of our branch committees and officials on the ground in recruiting members. These efforts are vital to the strength and effectiveness of the Union. I encourage you to keep up the good work. Thank you. Delegates, in June 2022, the public sector unions triggered Section 5.7 of the Public Building Momentum Agreement due to the high inflationary pressures that had evolved over the period of the agreement. Negotiations under the auspices of the WRC culminated with a pay proposal at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, which is normal by the sounds of it, on the 30th of August. The proposal was put to ballot and was unanimously ratified by the members. The Building Momentum Agreement has been extended to the 31st of December 2023, and the following pay adjustments apply in addition to the existing pay terms in Building Momentum 2020 to 2022. An increase in annualised basic salaries for public servants of 3% from the 2nd of February 2022. An increase in annualised basic salaries for public servants of 2% from the 1st of March 2023, and an increase in the annualised basic salaries for public servants of 1.5% or €750, whichever is the greatest, on the 1st of October 2023. Also around this time, the sectoral bargaining element of Building Momentum 2020-2022 was concluded, resulting in the 3.28% increase from the 1st of February 2022 for promotional grades. I can also report that preliminary engagement took place last week in relation to the next Public Service Agreement. As you are aware, we have been campaigning for the full commissioning of the 2021 McHugh report on increased supports for our student nurses whilst on placement. Finally, following further pressure on the HSE and Department of Health, the following improvements have now been implemented. Restoration of the intern pay for the duration of the internship to 80% of the first point of the salary scale, effective from the 1st of January 2023. Provision of 2 additional uniform tunics for the period of the internship, effective from the 1st of January 2023. The accommodation allowance has been revised and the new allowance will take effect from the start of 2022-2023 academic year, with a student midwife on supernumerary placement entitled to overnight accommodation allowance of up to €80 per night, subject to a weekly cap of €300. There will also be reimbursement of the reasonable cost of uniform laundry services and travel expenses when attending supernumerary placements. A new subsistence allowance has been introduced, and during years 1 to 3, nursing midwifery students are entitled to a flat rate meal allowance of €500 per student year per academic year. There are some outstanding matters in relation to travel arrangements for internship students, and these are being actively pursued at the moment. However, the overall implementation of the McHugh report finally recognises the real contribution of our student nurses to our overstretched mental health and intellectual disability services, and would significantly improve their student experience. As you know, a key element of the resolution of the 2019-2020 nursing recruitment and retention dispute was the introduction of the enhanced nurse grade. Part of the Labour Court recommendation was that an independent verification process would be conducted in relation to the impact of the grade. The verification process was delayed due to the pandemic, and Mr. Conal Devine was appointed as the independent chairperson to oversee the finalisation of the methodology for the verification process, to oversee the work of the appointed contractor, and to ensure that the verification required by the Labour Court recommendation related to the enhanced nursing grade was achieved. The process has been supported by Mr. Jonathan Drennan, Professor of Nursing in UCD, and following consultation with the nursing unions, 9 healthcare sites were agreed, inclusive of Laois Offaly and Longford Westmeath Mental Health Services, and the Daughters of Charity Intellectual Disability Services in Limerick. The process consists of engagement with nurses and midwives subject to the enhanced nurse and midwifery practice contract, initially with a concise targeted questionnaire, and then through follow-up exploratory interviews to build the fullest possible understanding of the issues and considerations arising from the additional roles and responsibilities associated with the enhanced nurse and midwifery practice contracts. Consultation with directors of nursing and midwifery and HR leads at plenary session and on-site at each of the 9 healthcare organisations, and a series of semi-structured stakeholder interviews with identified leads from the HSE, nursing unions, to gain as broad an understanding as possible, including potential competing perspectives. The questionnaires and interviews were due to be completed last week, and a draft report is expected in the coming weeks. We have a meeting regarding it next Tuesday, actually, and we're hoping that the report will be finalised shortly after that. The feedback to date has been positive, and I'd like to thank our enhanced nurses who have participated in the process. The Nursing Expert Review Body was established by the Minister for Health in 2021. This was initiated as part of the cessation of the 2019 nursing dispute. The remit of the ERB was to conduct a general review of nursing and midwifery, as well as specific issues related to management grades. The report was published on the 29th of March 2020 and consists of 47 recommendations, which span 5 themes: the current context, nursing and midwifery workforce, education and professional development, digital health, governance and leadership structures. Following engagement with the Chief Nurse, it was acknowledged this ambitious piece of work aligns with sharing the Vision 2020 and shaping the future of the intellectual disability nurse. The Expert Review Body Implementation Oversight Group was established last November, chaired by the Chief Nurse, to oversee the implementation of the recommendations. Members of the Implementation Oversight Group include P&A, other nursing unions, senior representatives from clinical, operational, education, HR, finance, policy and regulation. A big oversight group. Several IoT meetings have taken place to date, with the remit to oversee the implementation of the ERB report, to develop a prioritised action plan and establish implementation groups. The IoT will oversee the progress of the implementation action groups. While we welcome the report, there are also challenges, particularly in relation to mental health and intellectual disability nursing, and that is the undergraduate reviews section of the recommendations. We will probably hear more detail of this tomorrow from the Chief Nurse, who's addressing conference tomorrow afternoon. The P&A RCSI College of Continuous Professional Development continues to offer an extensive range of programmes which have been developed in response to service need. The delivery of the programmes by clinical experts is a key feature of this initiative, and clinicians assist participants with the application of complex theoretical concepts to the real world of patient care. The spring-summer programme is currently being developed, and I would encourage you all to engage. An all too common theme in the General Secretary's address to conferences over the last decade has been the lack of investment in mental health services and the impact of nursing vacancies on the delivery of services and the health and safety of both patients and staff. Incredibly, in the last budget in February saw a decrease in the percentage of the health budget, with mental health allocated 1.2 billion of a 23.4 billion health budget, equating to an all-time low percentage of 5.1% of the overall health budget for mental health. This is a long way short of the 10% recommended in Vision for Change 2006. At the outset of the negotiations on the transfer of the forensic services from Dundrum to Portrane over 4 years ago, the P&A put on record that the funds from the sale of the Dundrum site should be ring-fenced and reinvested in the mental health services, as is the recommendation in Vision for Change. Despite raising this at every level, including with the Minister and opposition politicians, this very valuable asset has been handed over to the Office of Public Works, denying the mental health services of a crucial investment opportunity and contrary to mental health policy. Delegates, how short-sighted is this decision, given the huge demand for resources within the mental health services? Once again, we are experiencing a recruitment and retention crisis in both mental health and intellectual disability nursing. This was confirmed following a national survey of branches which revealed over 700 vacancies in the mental health services. Since the decline of the COVID pandemic, services are now experiencing a very high level of nurses emigrating to Australia and Canada in particular. Nurses who were eligible to retire and who stayed on to support services are now finally retiring. These chronic shortages are happening at a time when there is a significant increase in the demand for mental health services post-COVID. The P&A highlighted these concerns over a year ago. However, the Department of Health and the HSE failed then and continues to fail to address the identified concerns. The impact of these shortages are apparent throughout the services on a daily basis. The P&A has been to the fore in highlighting the more severe of these impacts. We saw the closure of the CAMHS beds in Lindara, Dublin last May, with a commitment that they would be reopened in September. Almost 1 year on, there is no indication whatsoever that these beds will reopen. 16 beds closed in St James's Mental Health Services last September, which have only partially opened in the last few weeks. Nationally, a number of CAMHS beds have been effectively closed, and there are no staff to open the 60 vacant beds in the new National Forensic Mental Health Service. There are no staff to open the 20 CAMHS beds in the new Children's Hospital. And the home care teams in the St. Lomans/Tala services are operating generally on a 50% of their staffing complement, and on some days it gets even worse with service attempting to function with one nurse on duty on a home-based team. We will continue to highlight the realities on the ground of ongoing nursing vacancies, but the message to government is clear. It is inexcusable that nursing vacancies have been allowed to increase to such an extent that beds are being closed and vital services are being denied to communities across the country. Delegates, you will have heard on our conference many occasions highlight the deficiencies in our CAM services. Well, this year, the full extent of those failings were confirmed. In January, the Mental Health Commission issued an interim report on the review on the provision of child and adolescent mental health services. The Commission made the decision to issue an interim report due to concerns in relation to the risk to safety and welfare of children receiving mental health services, the management of the risk and the lack of governance. The Mental Health Commission report is nothing less than a damning indictment of the many years of lack of investment in mental health services, lack of workforce planning within the services, and particularly in CAMS. It also highlights a CAM service that is failing children, young people, families, communities and staff. The pressures and burnout experienced by staff left to cope with staffing shortages in CAMS is intolerable, and it is growing. Despite the publication of the Maskey report in January 2020 and the Mental Health report, it is inconceivable that over the past year, the diminution of mental health services for children and adolescents of this country continues. I've already referred to the unacceptable closure of beds in Lindara in Dublin. We've also seen the reductions in operational beds in St Vincent's in Dublin from 12 to 10, a reduction in Galway from 20 to 14, and in East Lynn in Cork effectively have 5 operational beds. Even though they have 16 beds, they have not admitted more than 5 over the last year and a half due to staffing shortages. In effect, we have 42 operational beds nationally, which is less than 50% of the 100 beds recommended in Vision for Change. This is 30 beds less than this time last year, and this is against a background of an increased demand for CAMS and an increase in the complexity of cases referred to the service post-COVID. Waiting lists have almost doubled over the past 2.5 years, from 2,112 in July 2020 to almost 4,000 in November 2022. This reduction in beds will further exacerbate an already unacceptable waiting list for CAMS, and as we know from past experience, will ultimately lead to the inappropriate admission of children and adolescents to adult mental health units. I am once again reiterating our demand on the Minister, Department of Health and the HSE to urgently establish workforce planning groups at both CHO level and nationally to address the crisis in the recruitment and retention of psychiatric nurses. We met with Minister Donnelly last April and Minister Butler in June, and we highlighted the urgency in bringing forward a mechanism for workforce planning in psychiatric nursing in the form of a target task force. We also highlighted the critical priority in relation to CAM services. We outlined a number of targeted, innovative and incentivised measures to address the crisis. However, despite our emphasis on the urgency of addressing an ever-increasing hemorrhaging of nurses and the need for workforce planning at both CHO level and nationally, no groups have been established except for one CHO area. For some years now, the P&A has been warning that the spiralling cost of accommodation was a major concern, particularly for young nurses and those contemplating a return from abroad. The cost of purchasing property and increasingly of renting in the major cities is prohibitive and is outstripping nurses' pay, and this in turn is feeding into the nursing recruitment and retention crisis. I believe it is becoming increasingly critical that government address the housing and social needs of nurses by developing and prioritising a variety of subsidised accommodation to ensure we can attract and retain stable nursing workforce. At the outset of our engagement over 4 years ago with regard to the transfer of the National Forensic Mental Health Services from Dundrum to Portrane, we tabled about the necessity to build subsidised staff accommodation on the vast St Edith's site. And now, in the past few days, we have seen lots of unions coming out looking for subsidised accommodation or the Dublin waiting allowed. We tabled this 4 years ago at the beginning of the talks in relation to the transfer. We tabled it with the Minister last year and Minister Butler as well last year. Nothing was done, and we had a response that time that was very doable. But now that it's becoming a public sector issue, it's going to be less doable. But we do know that there is a lot of land that the HSE owned, that there is no reason why we shouldn't have subsidised accommodation similar to what they have in a lot of UK hospitals. We could build on the old Dundrum site, we can build in St Edith's. There are a lot of places we could build, and we have a lot of vacant houses belonging to the HSE that could be used for the staff to help with the recruitment retention problem. During COVID and post-COVID, we heard lots of lip service in relation to mental health. However, when it comes to putting measures in place to alleviate the crisis in the provision and delivery of services, all we experience is a level of complacency and disregard that shows no understanding of the pressures throughout the services. This is totally unacceptable. Following over 4 years of negotiation under the auspices of the WRC, the new National Forensic Mental Health Service in Portrane opened on the 13th of November with the transfer of patients from the Victorian building in Dundrum to the state-of-the-art facility in Portrane. This followed intense negotiations over the previous weeks, culminating after 12 hours of negotiation on Sunday the 6th of November, with the WRC proposal on the relocation. There are 40 elements to the proposal, inclusive of staffing ratios, increase in promotional positions, compensation as recommended by the Labour Court, and security issues. A ballot was conducted and the proposal was unanimously accepted. An oversight body has been established to ensure compliance with the agreement. The body, which meets on a monthly basis, comprises of union officials and senior nurse management. Despite the National Forensic Service being a state-of-the-art facility, they have numerous nursing shortages resulting in staffing difficulties on a daily basis, necessitating the redeployment from therapy services and other services to ensure adequate and safe staffing. The National Forensic Mental Health Services comprises of 170 beds, of which only 110 are open at present, and the prospect of the remaining 60 beds opening in the near future are bleak, as this will require over 100 additional nurses. This is yet more evidence and demonstrates the urgency of an immediate targeted workforce planning for psychiatric nursing. I could not let this opportunity pass without thanking the present and the previous branch officers over the past 4 years for their hard work in bringing this historical transfer to Portrane to fruition. Thank you. Reconfiguration and transition programmes continue in a number of intellectual disability services, namely St Joseph's Mental Health of ID in Portrane, St Bridget's Mental Health of ID in Ballinasloe and Donegal Intellectual Disability Services. Over the past year, there has been positive engagement in the reconfiguration of the services in Donegal. However, the same cannot be said for the engagement in Ballinasloe. The reconfiguration engagement is under the auspices of the WRC for the past 2 years, and despite this, there has been no meaningful or purposeful engagement. In St Joseph's Portrane, the process is protracted, and over 4 years on, we are still engaging in relation to agreeing a final transitional proposal. There is absolutely no urgency whatsoever in this transition programme. There remains a reluctance on HSE management to adhere to the Shaping the Future of Intellectual Disability Nursing report, which identifies the direction of intellectual disability nursing with expanded nursing roles over the lifespan of care for people with intellectual disabilities. As we are aware, there are few specialised roles in the ID services and in particular AMPs, well below the 3% nationally. It is imperative that in the negotiations in relation to reconfiguration that we maximise the number of specialised roles in line with the report to enable the provision of a quality service for people with intellectual disability. As you are aware, the restoration of the 37.5-hour week came into effect from the 1st of July last year. Once again, in the mental health services, implementation of this member entitlement has been exceptionally slow in a number of services. Just prior to Christmas, we had to resort to balloting in 8 branches and were due to commence action on the 23rd of December. A tentative agreement was reached in these branches to enable us to suspend the industrial action. However, some of the services have reneged on the agreements, which is totally disingenuous, and we will be issuing notices to commence industrial action in the coming weeks in those services that have not implemented the 37.5-hour week. We will not tolerate this disregard of our members' rights any longer. Delegates, despite the professionalism and dedication shown by healthcare professionals during the COVID campaign, one group of professionals, namely paramedics, our NASRA members, are still fighting to be represented by the union of their choice, the PNA. Despite a pause during COVID, the NASRA campaign for the right to represent paramedics at the branch of the PNA continues. This issue was back on the floor of the Dáil in February during a debate on the current delivery of services by the National Ambulance Services. Independents, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit and Social Democrat deputies took the opportunity to raise the issue once again of NASRA and call for its full recognition. I took the opportunity to write to these Dáil deputies to thank them for their ongoing support and to remind them that NASRA has been to the forefront since its formation in highlighting service and operational deficiencies in the National Ambulance Services and calling the National Ambulance Service, HSE and Government to account on the crucial issues facing the service and its dedicated professional workforce. I also reminded them that the 13-year campaign by paramedics, EMTs and advanced paramedics within the NAS to have the right to join NASRA PNA as their trade union of their choice and to be represented by NASRA PNA is continue in the face of inexplicable opposition from the HSE. Our commitment to the NASRA branch of the PNA remains steadfast, and I'm again calling on the Minister and the HSE to bring this unnecessary and divisive dispute to an end once and for all. Last month, we received a warm welcome at the Horatio Conference in Malta on the theme of reuniting mental health nurses. It was indeed a great event to re-engage with colleagues from across Europe, and Horatio continues to build as the representative leading voice for psychiatric mental health nursing in Europe and beyond, influencing and advising the various organs of the EU and the WHO on mental health and other nursing matters. It was great to see Professor Agnes Higgins of the School of Nursing and Midwifery in Trinity College receive the Horatio Fellowship Award, an award which recognises recipients for their contribution to the professional activities in support of psychiatric mental health nursing, either in Europe or worldwide. Professor Higgins has been at the forefront of mental health nursing education and research and is a true friend of the P&A and Horatio. I am also pleased to say that Aisling Culhane was re-elected as General Secretary of Horatio, and we will look forward to next year in Malmö in Sweden. Slightly more expensive. I want to congratulate Mark Johnson on his election to the NMBI on the Psychiatric Nursing Division. Unfortunately, our candidate, Siobhan McAndrew, was narrowly defeated in the ID division, but I want to thank Siobhan for her endeavours. I would also like to thank Liam Hamill and Catherine Kokeman for their representation on NIMBY over the past 5 years. I would like to thank all the branch committees and their officials for all the hard work and commitment throughout the year. I also want to thank the Officer Board for all their hard work and dedication in the past year. And as Ollie mentioned this morning, I want to thank Liz Collins for all her valued input, commitment and attention to detail over the last 14 years, and I wish you well in the future, Liz. I want to thank Declan Duffy and Heather Fagan for their work on the board, and I want to welcome all the new people onto the board: Aoife Donoghue, Con Burke, Robbie Redmond and Pádraig Shanley. And I look forward to their input. I also want to thank all the wives, husbands and partners of all P&A activists, and also Leash for her support throughout the year. Finally, delegates, there are numerous challenges for our mental health services, and I have to tell you that I believe those challenges are only likely to intensify given the growing demands and the complexities of those demands for services at every level. As you're aware, Mr. Bernard Gloucester is the newly appointed CEO of the HSE, and I wish him well in his role. I will be meeting Mr. Gloucester, a delegation from the P&A, on Monday week, and I can assure you I will be telling him of the mood of this conference and raising with him the full agenda of the challenges and concerns I have outlined to you in this report. I am immensely proud of the role that the P&A, our staff and members play in the delivery and development of mental health services, and I thank you all for your continued support. Thank you.